All right. We're going to try streaming a game today. I'm sitting in the dark dungeon. I'll turn this on for just a second. Like, makes me tired with these lights on all the time for no reason. So, kind of overcast and rainy today. Do this like I do my coding things. It is Sunday, January 8th, around noon. So, I played the beginner's guide a week ago on New Year's Eve. I played it to ring in the new year. I found it the week before, and I don't remember how I found it, but I thought it was interesting. I love walking simulators. I love simple games. Basically, like I want to experience the story. I was never a good gamer. I was never a good competitive gamer, despite having tried several times. And I think Firewatch was the first game that really turned me on to walking simulators. And Beginner's Guide is a walking simulator, effectively. And the content is interesting. It's kind of dark and moody and a little sad. And I played through it and I was left with a lot of emotions. And it was right before I started at the Recurse Center this year. So I'm in the first batch in 2023 at Recurse Center right now. And it just fit with my attitude and some books I've been reading. And not just the wordplay. I mean, the wordplay is part of it. I was reading, I'll go to say the name of the book and I'm going to forget it. Let me Google it really quick so I get this right. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. The author, his last name is Suzuki. But I didn't read it. I listened to it. I listened to that audiobook and I had talked to one of my friends and I was like, yeah, I'm focusing on having a beginner's mind. And I don't know, it's interesting. Like there's pros and cons to that, I think. But if you take it at face value, you should have beginner's mind. So I played this thing, Beginner's Guide, and it was not at all what I thought it was going to be. It was weird. It's hard to understand what the game was or would be or is, which is a good thing from the reviews. And I went through the Steam reviews and it said, don't read any reviews, just play the game, go in as blind as possible. And I did. So I'm going to stream this. I've never streamed a game before. I don't really know what I'm doing. As usual with the streaming stuff, I'll probably find out later that I didn't record audio or something. But this all looks right, set up in Streamlabs. So I think I'm good to go. And, I saw some audio come through. So we'll just check when I changed the window focus. I saw that come through. So I think we're good. I'm going to stream this. I'm going to talk a little bit through each level and then maybe talk a little more after each level and certainly talk some more at the very end of this. So it took it takes about an hour and a half to play through this. So I'm going to try to do this all in one setting. I'll probably take a break in about 45 minutes, maybe about halfway through. I'll take a break because I'll probably be done with my drink and I will need some more water. So cheers. And here we go. My kind of game. 4 buttons. Or 5. 4 keys. So I think it's interesting. It's hard to separate what I felt the first time I played this versus and having known, since this is the second playthrough, I know what's going on. But I can kind of remember. I mean, it was just a week ago, so I can kind of remember initially playing that thinking, yeah, this seems very plausible. You've met this person, you got to see this demo, lots of people modded different games. Counter-Strike's one of the biggest mods of all time, so people making levels for Counter-Strike as a first step in the game dev, especially in 2008, that totally fits. 2008's maybe a little bit late. What was 2008 without Googling? Was like Counter-Strike Source was out or just came out, maybe? Because Half-Life 2 came out in 2004 or 5. So that all felt like, yeah, it's all believable. There was a little bit of this where I started to go, okay, wait, is this a real story or is this not a real story? So it started right there. I do remember I was already like, is this true or not true? And I think that'll continue the questioning. That's really jarring, by the way, to go, just straight into it blaring at you. Knowing enough about making a mod or making a game, I thought that first level was very interesting when I played it last week and today, in that it does feel like somebody's first attempt. Thank you for the hint, Davey. Um, yeah, it does feel like somebody's first attempt at a game. And it does also feel like somebody just really trying all the things. Like, here's a level, here's a gun, here it shoots, here's music, here's sound effects. So I thought that was interesting. The try walking backwards hint is because if I push all keys on my keyboard right now, I can't move. I can only walk backwards. I thought that last one was really interesting too. I think that stands on its own. Like, it should be a thing. And it didn't feel like something made by an amateur at all. It felt like it had a point. It was poignant. It had a point, and that a lot of creativity and thought went into it. So I don't know. Now is when I started questioning what is going on. The game is nothing but giant blocks of text explaining. You don't get enough time to read all of them. And I don't remember if you can read them again, but I thought they were interesting. I think actually, and I do remember I started on the other side of the room last time reading, and I felt like there were a couple that were actually like, yeah, these are actually like not bad ideas for little toy games. This feels like Half-Life 2. I think this is just like the stock source textures. Maybe not, but that's what it feels like. Obviously the first time it took me a second to be like, yes, okay, you can only flip that one switch. This is interesting too. The three dots. That'll get mentioned later, I think. It kind of reminds me of there's like a thing about hacker websites where you put the glider pattern on your website. You should put that on my website, as I remember this. Make a note about that. Okay, so when I saw this last week, or week before, whenever it was, um, that last end of that last levels, the first thing that made me start questioning this is all not a real story, because I did give some like, some mental space to this is going to be a real story of some kind that he's capturing. But when I saw that, I was like, that feels like Stanley Parable. And I'm now thinking this is not a true story. That's the first hint I had because I was like, yep, Stanley Parable vibes. So I wrote that down because I think that's really a strong point. The tools shape the art or output of the artist or creator. And having played around with Source Engine, this is true. You build stuff with brushes, and I don't. There were different kinds. I haven't touched it in years, but I do remember starting out and trying to understand brushes and everything starting from a cube. And so yeah, everything he said makes a lot of sense as I remember it. Obviously, you can build whatever you want in the engine, but you are, as he said, kind of restricted by the tools that they give you. I like this too. This is really simple architecture and it's obviously super easy to build with, extrusions and intersects and such. I had two thoughts here. I thought one that sounds like a very real story. So I was like, oh wow, yeah, I could see a friend doing that for me. I could do that for a friend. But something else about him making the comment about the prison cell staying closed for a full hour made me think this was Davy's game, not a real story, because it's Stanley Parable. Stanley Parable has an achievement where it's like, don't play the game for 5 years. And there's a lot of, I don't know, it's like quirky humor, but the sense of humor that comes through in Stanley Parable, I think is Davy. I think that's his personality. I don't know him, but I think that's his personality coming through. And that same sort of time bound kind of gotcha thing, like you would actually have to spend a full in game hour doing something like that's in Portal too. That's that same sort of humor in Portal. You have to spend some time doing some stuff to unlock one of the achievements, like falling through the infinite loop that you can make. So yeah, I started questioning that again here. I'm like, oh, okay, fake story. This is all Davy. There's those dots again. I wanted to pause here to say I think that's a fascinating mechanic. I love the head turn for the modality speak, listen. Like, I don't know. That's awesome. I really love that mechanic. And I felt like it was worth turning the audio off to call that out. Fascinating. When I first played this, I was like, okay, is this really connected to the internet or not? I don't know. Obviously, the negative feedback fits in with this being connected to the internet. That's interesting. I think there's some projection and reflection going on here. Typewriter Narnia here. Such a weird intro. The last level is interesting. The notes, like I said, it faked me out about the internet connection. But that's when it first started getting the more emotional sense to it. There's those dots again. Oh, where was I supposed to go? Left side sofa. All right, before we go there, I like that Davy gives you an interpretation that you can hang on to, that he gives you a concrete interpretation. But the game, like whatever's trying to be communicated here, there's more going on than Davy's interpretation, in my opinion. The interpretation that's being offered through narration. And the thing that stood out to me, that clicked with me, and I wrote it down, that this prison, and my projection of this prison is knowing what to do versus being able to do it. And it started to remind me of the talk from Ira Glass that's really good about doing things, creative things, and beginning things. But yeah, that's where the first kind of, I don't know, the game invokes a lot of feelings for me. And I can relate to doing creative things. I can relate specifically to building games, to doing 3D stuff on some level. And that was my takeaway with the prison, and especially the escape sequence of the prison. And like, oh, here's the escape sequence, and you show up and you can't start the sequence. That, you know, these abstract concepts with concrete examples, knowing what to do, but you can't do it. Even that's out of your control. And I don't know that that's what was necessarily the intent of the communication, but, and this is why this is such a great piece of art too, right? You think about art and the things that you look at in the art that you appreciate. It's what you project onto it and what you see reflected back at you, both, you know, projecting and reflecting, which I've said, you know, said previously. So, yeah, I like that this is a very artistic game. And I was feeling that too when I was first playing. I was like, okay, yeah, like I really like the abstractness and the conveying something. Every game tries to convey something emotional. Every game tries to tell a story, but this one is digging at something where, for me, I'm starting to reflect and dig a little deeper on, you know, into myself, what I'm feeling about playing this game. All right, let's continue. This level looks super polished, by the way. So we come up here, there's no switch. We are forced, as the narrator told us, to go into the house. So I enjoyed this the first playthrough, and in this one, I'm noticing how forceful the narration is, forcing the opinion on you. Hmm. Hmm. I think it's a great shot. Better person. Okay. To play this game properly, you must keep your eyes closed. All right, I'm gonna keep eyes closed. Clicked. Still keeping them closed. Can't see anything. Gonna open my eyes. Oh, help! I'm blind. There's the door. I got a kick out of this because I did this exact same way when I played this. I kept my eyes closed. I'm like, what is going on? I love that you could say, I can't see anything as you had your eyes closed. All right. I'm bursting with creative energy. Didn't work. So we'll go with number 2. I can't keep making these. It's interesting that he says they're going to get desperate. And I relate a lot to the questions about creativity on the last one and just feeling out of energy, and that you can't do it. You can't go forward. You feel stuck. For me, every idea seems like a bad idea. The ending of that, it's heavy. Like I don't care for the woman, the whimpering noises. It's an interesting choice. We will destroy the machine. We'll destroy everything the machine has created. It's very interesting. You follow the machine, or follow me and destroy the machine, you're giving up on creativity. Follow me and destroy everything the machine's created. You acknowledge some source and control of the machine over your creativity, but you let it remain, and you're only destroying the things that it has made. And it may be in an attempt to hurt the machine. Let's destroy what it created. Well, the question the narrator poses is interesting too. I think I would appreciate someone sharing something I made, assuming it was intended to be shared. Definitely foreshadowing that he crossed a boundary as he's feeling exasperated, explaining that he shared these things, and that's what he would want someone to do for him. That music is extremely eerie, but I love this architecture. This reminds me of the movie with Christian Bale where they do like kung fu with guns. I can't think of the name of it. Speaking of default source engine textures, That's interesting. It's a very vulnerable statement. Feeling like you need to see yourself in someone else, which is related but different from the validation seeking. Hmm. Well, there is a theme there with him saying that he was getting value out of showing somebody else's work. There's this online web comic where a person says, "I made this," and they take it. And I don't remember what it is, like a oatmeal comic or something. It's like, "I made this," and then the person takes it, and then they say, "I made this." And so I don't know. Yeah, there is something to that. That's an interesting plot twist. Stop adding lampposts to my games. This is interesting. Davey gave a talk about the work that he did on Stanley Parable and the feedback he got. So it's interesting to see this being expressed in the game. That's really cool. I really like this concept. And this concept, it's in Stanley Parable, I guess to an extent. I think it's in Superliminal as well. Is it Superliminal? Subliminal? Superliminal, I think was the name of the game. Not confusing with Super Hot. That's fascinating. I love this idea of there's no motion. You don't ride the train, but you walk through the train and it takes you to a destination. That's a very cool concept. Related, there is a game that fools around with like non-Euclidean geometry that is related to this. That's really interesting too. That's the note that I wrote down. Being driven without external validation kind of gets into just what are your motivations for doing a thing. I really dig this kind of abstract art going on in 3D space here too. Kind of reminds me of that thing that guy built out in the desert. He's just done a giant landscape art installation. So we went through the train station, back to the elevator, and back around to the beam. It's interesting. I wonder how many games end by you killing yourself or sacrificing yourself. We remember the reasoning behind throwing yourself into the beam was actually to sacrifice yourself to save others. But that's very interesting. I guess recently the Death Loop did that at the end of Death Loop. Oops, I tried to get a screenshot of that. I missed it. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's like that's a heavy game. I don't even think it's fair to call it a game. It's art. And I think it's one of the few examples of I think, pretty popular piece of just kind of open-ended art. I don't know. That it's not necessarily open-ended, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, you can't recreate your first time through something. And the first time with the simple door puzzle, and the first time experiencing some of the music and the aesthetics and the rooms and the way it made you feel. But I don't know. I really like that game, and I wanted to capture playing it so that I would have this and my thoughts around it, because I had some big thoughts, heavy thoughts around the game and creativity and validation, external validation and motivation. And it was like, I don't know, it was just a perfect fit. It was all serendipity to find the game, to play it as New Year's, as we rang in the New Year's. And yeah. And then that is the games. There's not a lot to explore. So, when people watch this, or if people watch this, they get a sense of the game, and then my takes on things as we went through. But the notes, I wrote quite a few notes this playthrough. And some of it I already mentioned, but I wanted to run back through what I wrote down. It's hard when creativity is a part of your identity. It's hard. Paul Graham has an essay. It is keep your identity small. And that gets brought up in flame wars around programming languages and such. And I've read that, and my interpretation, the things that I project into that essay is, it's around, like, if I say I'm a Python developer and then people talk about the virtues of Java, it is not worth getting mad about. I think in his essay, he talks about politics and religion and why these things are such hot topics, and programming turns into these religious flame wars around the tools that you use and the languages that you use and why they're better. And anyways, there's no winning those arguments. And anyways, so creativity as a part of your identity is a similar thing, especially with external validation. And at the end there, when he kind of talks about what are your motivating factors, why are you doing something? And to be motivated by external validation is dangerous. It's very dangerous. And I put that as a key thing at the end. The key takeaway for me is, how do you become driven by something that isn't external validation? He says streaming this game, which is probably like one of the worst games to ever be streaming, as the whole thing about the game is sharing other people's content. He does have a thing on his website though where he gives permission for this to be for this to be on a stream. That's a long time ago. People don't really, I don't feel like that's still a thing people get stressed about, like it was when streaming first started happening. But yeah, creativity is a part of your identity. I mentioned this when it crossed my mind, but people taking your creativity for their own, and they project and reflect, and they steal, and they see creativity. They look at the creative endeavors of others, and they take that. I think what I'm guilty of is living too much in my head, and I'll have these ideas and I'll appreciate things and I'll think, oh yeah, that's great, that's amazing. And it just kind of like solidifies in my head. It's like, I did this thing because I appreciate the creativity of this thing, but I didn't do it. And I need to find that. I want to find that webcomic. Yeah. So, it's just opening the link. Keep it. There we go. Yeah. So I made this. You made this? Takes it. I made this. I mean, that is it. That's exactly what came into my head playing this game and thinking about the creativity around that. So I think it's very fitting. I think it's interesting. This game too is one of the, it's interesting to think about video games as a way to process trauma and process emotions beyond the emotions that the game invokes in you. And I feel like Davey as a creator was definitely processing something. That's my opinion. I mean, hearing the talks that he's given and things that he has talked about in his blog after Stanley Parable and motivation for Stanley Parable. I don't know. This just really resonates. And it was extremely brave of him to put this together and to narrate it himself. And I had that as a note. I just felt like this is a very authentic multimedia experience, but I never really thought about games. I mean, of course, people use art and creativity to work through emotions and trauma and such, but I never really thought about how he puts this out here, which is kind of this weird thing where he talks about this external validation and processing all of these things, that he puts all this emotion into this game that is now public, that he is getting potentially feedback on. And I emailed him. I'll send an email to that Gmail address that he throws out at the beginning of the game. I asked him if he'd do a podcast interview with me. I don't know that he'll ever even read the email, but I was very curious, and you never know. It's always worth asking. Worst he can do is say no if he ever responds. Yeah, this is kind of a big thing. I put, there's more to it than any way of knowing. That's a big thing. Like the beginner's dilemma, creator's dilemma, like all this sort of stuff. You just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And there's way more to create, especially creative endeavors, than you know. And then you start to know. Like I said, I go back to Ira Glass's mean, I don't know. I think it was just an interview he was doing, but he talks about having good taste and having good taste when you're beginning in something and knowing that your own work is bad, knowing what good is and knowing you want to do something and knowing it's not good. The other thing I wrote down that he brought up is that the tools shape the art and the output of the artist. And that's huge. Of course, the medium is the message. Like, we've known parts of this for a while, but talking about it in the sense of a game engine and the restrictions that are placed on you, it does very much affects how you communicate. But I mean, that's just life. Like, English affects how I communicate, writing affects how you communicate, separate from, I mean, pure written word from multimedia and PowerPoints and things. Other notes I had on here, last level is telling you to stop. So I don't know. You know, on the last one, I had the same theme in a few of these notes. It was just, you know what to do versus being able to do it. I think I already mentioned that a few times. So yeah, so that was the beginner's guide, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it evoked a lot of emotions in me and things for me to think about with my motivation for doing things and why I seek certain validation from friends and family and random people on the internet. And it's dangerous. It's very dangerous to seek validation from complete strangers. They shouldn't have that much control. So, and as again, I realize this is a little bit of an oxymoron in a sense of doing a stream and sharing this on a stream, as I say, I need to be careful about seeking validation. So I will toss this up on YouTube and let this be a record of my thoughts, feelings, and experiences playing the beginner's guide. And I think it's a fantastic game. And really, hats off to Davey for doing this work and putting it out there. Hope everyone has a great day.